The Galactic Council's emergency session convened in chaos. 73 species had gathered in the vast amphitheater of Station Nexus, their various forms of panic creating a cacophony that even the universal translators struggled to parse. At the center of it all, High Arbiter Velenish of the Korthani displayed the holographic data that had sent shockwaves through civilized space. Kepler for to be is gone, Velenish announced, her crystalline voice cutting through the noise. Not destroyed, not evacuated, gone. The hologram showed empty space where the human colony world should have been. No debris field, no gravitational anomalies, just nothing. This is impossible, rumbled Gorik's Ironhide, the Durrani representative, his massive form shifting uneasily. Planets don't simply vanish. Tell that to the 53 million humans who live there. Velenish replied coldly, or the 3,000 ships that disappeared with it. Captain Fyra Voss of the Terran Colonial Navy stood at the edge of the assembly, her scarred face impassive despite the fear clawing at her chest. She'd lost her sister on Kepler for 4B, lost her nephew, lost friends who'd been building lives on humanity's most successful agricultural world. What about the transmission? She asked, her voice steady despite everything. Velenish's tentacles writhed with discomfort. Yes, the final communication. The hologram shifted. Displaying the last message received from Kepler for 4B, it had come from the planetary defense grid. Timestamp showing it was sent exactly 3.7 seconds before the planet's disappearance. The message was audio only, and when it played, the assembled representatives fell silent. Laughter, human laughter, male, middle-aged, lasting exactly 14 seconds before cutting to static. That's it. Demanded Counselor Zephyria of the Altarian Collective, her gossamer wings fluttering with agitation. No distress call, no explanation, just laughter. We've analyzed the audio, Velenish continued. The voice belongs to Admiral Kares Durand, commander of the Kepler 4B Defense Fleet. Vocal analysis suggests he was not under duress, not panicked, not coerced. He was genuinely amused. The implications hung in the air like a poison cloud. 53 million humans had vanished, and their military commander had been laughing about it. The Terran government maintains they had no knowledge of any experimental technology on Kepler for 4B, Velenish said, her gaze fixing on Captain Voss. They claim complete ignorance of these events. Voss felt the weight of 73 species' attention, some curious, some suspicious, most afraid. In the 3 centuries since humanity had joined the galactic community, they'd gained a reputation for being unpredictable, dangerous when cornered, capable of innovations that often violated several laws of physics and common sense. We don't know what happened, Voss said firmly. Earth is as confused as everyone else. Confused. The word came from Nexus Prime, the artificial intelligence that governed the station. Its voice was everywhere and nowhere, synthetic yet somehow conveying deep concern. Captain Voss, are you familiar with the Fermi paradox? Of course. The humans solved it rather dramatically when they invented their first FTL drive by essentially telling physics to go to hell and making it work anyway. Now a human world has vanished, and the last thing we heard was laughter. Forgive me if I find this concerning. The assembly erupted in heated discussion. Some species demanded immediate investigation, others suggested quarantine protocols for all human worlds. The Vorthan delegate actually suggested preemptive strikes, though he was quickly shouted down. Through it all, Voss remained silent, her mind racing. She knew Kares Durand had served under him during the Proxima conflict. He wasn't a man who laughed easily, and never without reason. If he'd been amused in those final moments, it meant something important. I volunteer to lead the investigation, she announced, cutting through the debate. The chamber fell silent again. Absolutely not, Velenish said immediately. Humans investigating a human disappearance? The conflict of interest is exactly why I need to go, Voss interrupted. You want to know what happened to Kepler for 4B. Send someone who understands how humans think, how we fight, how we die. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. And how we laugh? The investigation fleet was a compromised wealth ships from 8 different species, with Captain Voss aboard the Terran vessel Indomitable as liaison rather than commander. High Arbiter Velenish had insisted on leading personally, her crystalline form constantly refracting the bridge lights as she studied the sensor data. Nothing, reported Lieutenant Commander Braxton from the science station. No residual energy. Signatures, no gravitational disturbances, no quantum echoes. It's like Kepler-4b was never here. They'd been in the system for 6 hours, and the mystery had only deepened. The asteroid belt showed no signs of disturbance. The gas giants' moons maintained their orbits perfectly, even the space stations in the outer system remained functional. Their automated systems continue in their routines as if nothing had happened. Captain, called Ensign Marlowe from communications. I'm detecting something odd in the background radiation. It's pattern. Voss moved to the console, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Show me. The pattern was subtle, barely distinguishable from cosmic background noise, but it was there, a repeating sequence buried in the static, cycling every 4.7 minutes. It's a message, Voss breathed, compressed, encrypted, and scattered across multiple frequencies. Can you decode it? Belenish asked, her tentacles coiling with interest. Working on it. Voss's hands moved faster, pulling up decryption algorithms. It's using a Terran military cipher, but modified. Whoever sent this knew our protocols, but changed them. The breakthrough came after 2 hours of intense work. The message resolved into a single line of text. The Watchers have woken. Find the echo. Trust the void. KD cares Durand, Voss whispered. He's alive. Before anyone could respond, the space around them exploded into chaos. Massive shapes emerged from behind the system's starships, but unlike anything in the galactic database. They were organic in appearance, all flowing curves and bioluminescent patches, yet clearly artificial. Dozens of them, each easily the size of a battleship, unknown vessels. Identify yourselves. Belenish transmitted on all frequencies. The response came not in words, but in images flooding their minds. Visions of vast cosmic structures, of civilizations rising and falling across millennia, of watchers observing from the spaces between stars, and underneath it all, a sense of ancient anger and terrible purpose. They're not just ships, gasped Ensign Marlowe, blood trickling from her nose. They're alive, thinking, and they're older than the galaxy itself. The first attack came without warning. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to bend space itself lanced out from the alien vessels. The Corthonic cruiser Luminance took a direct hit, its crystalline hull shattering like glass. The Durrani dreadnought Ironwall returned fire with its fusion cannons, but the alien ships absorbed the energy and seemed to grow brighter, shields at 60%. Braxton reported as the Indomitable shuddered under a near miss. Whatever they're using, it's designed to disrupt our defensive systems. Voss studied the tactical display, her mind racing. The alien ships moved with purpose, not just attacking, but herding the investigation fleet toward the inner system. They wanted something. Belenish, she called out, we need to. The High Arbiter was convulsing, her crystalline form flickering between visible and translucent. The visions, she gasped, they're showing me the truth about the Watchers, about why they're here. Another alien ship emerged from the stars. Corona, this one massive beyond comprehension. It was easily 100 kilometers long, its surface covered in structures that hurt to look at directly. As it approached, the psychic pressure intensified, bringing half the bridge crew to their knees. They're not invaders, Belenish said, her voice distorted by the psychic interference. They're gardeners, caretakers. They've been watching the galaxy for millions of years. Culling species that grow to dangerous. The implications hit Voss like a physical blow. They took Kepler-4b. The humans there discovered something they weren't supposed to know, or did something they weren't supposed to do. Belenish agreed, but that's not the worst part. They're not just here for one world. They're here for all of them, every human colony, every world where your species has spread. They've decided humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to continue. The massive ship began to glow, energy building along its length. Similar buildups appeared on the other alien vessels, all targeting the investigation fleet. But there's something else, Belenish continued, her form stabilizing slightly. The humans on Kepler-4b, they knew this was coming. They were ready, and whatever they did, whatever Cares Durand found so amusing, it's still out there. Waiting, the alien ships opened fire simultaneously, and space around the investigation fleet became a maelstrom of impossible energies. But even as the battle raged, Voss couldn't shake the image of Admiral Durand's final moments standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching 53 million people disappear into the void, and laughing, What could possibly be so funny? About the end of the world. The investigation fleet was dying. Of the 12 ships that had entered the Kepler 440 system, only 7 remained functional. The Altarian vessel Wind Whisper had been completely disintegrated by the aliens' reality warping weapons. Its gossamer crew scattered across dimensions. The Vorthan cruiser Stormbreaker drifted powerless, its crew catatonic from psychic overload. "We can't keep this up," Braxton shouted over the screaming of overstressed systems. "Our shields are failing faster than we can recharge them, Captain." Voss watched the tactical display with grim determination. The alien watcher she'd started thinking of them as the gardeners were playing with them. Every time one of the investigation ships tried to retreat, the gardeners would herd them back. Like a cat toying with wounded mice, they're not trying to destroy us quickly, she realized. They're studying us, learning our capabilities. For what purpose? Velenish asked, her crystalline form now flickering erratically. The psychic assault was taking its toll on her species more than others. To know how to hunt the rest of us. The largest gardener ship, the one they dubbed the Harvester, pulsed with ominous light. Suddenly, the space around them filled with new contacts, hundreds of them, materializing from what looked like tears in reality itself. "Reinforcements," Ensign Marlowe reported, her voice hollow with despair. "We're reading 347 additional vessels, ranging from frigate to dreadnought class." The communication console lit up with incoming transmissions from across human space, colony worlds, military installations, even Earth itself, all reporting the same thing. The gardeners were everywhere, appearing simultaneously at every human settlement in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Rexton from Mars Command," came one frantic transmission. "We're under attack by unknown hostiles, requesting immediate assistance. They're not just attacking our ships, they're targeting the planets themselves. Dear God, they're trying to crack the crust of Luna. Proxima Centauri calling any available vessels." Came another. "The attackers are using some kind of gravitational weapon. The primary star is becoming unstable. We're evacuating the system." But there, the transmission cut to static. Voss felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders. She'd been in desperate situations before, but nothing like this. The gardeners weren't just superior. In technology, they were operating on a level of science that made human understanding look like cave paintings. "We need to get out of here," she said. "Warn Earth. Coordinated defense." "The gardeners won't let us leave," Velenish replied. "They want us to witness the end of humanity, to record it for their archives. Then we give them something to record. They won't expect." Voss activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All vessels. This is Captain Voss. We're implementing Protocol Omega. I repeat, Protocol Omega is now in effect." The response was immediate. Even ships from other species began reconfiguring their systems, following the protocol that had been developed during the worst days of the Proxima conflict. It was a human invention, but one that had been shared with their allies, a last resort tactic that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Captain," Braxton said quietly, "Protocol Omega has never been tested on this scale. The energy feedback could what? Kill us?" Voss laughed bitterly. "Look around. Lieutenant Commander, we're already dead. The question is whether we take some of them with us." The surviving ships began to move into formation, their fusion reactors redlining as they prepared for the most dangerous maneuver. In the human tactical manual, they would overload their FTL drives simultaneously, creating a cascade failure that would tear a hole in space-time itself. The gardeners seemed to sense the change in their prey's behavior. The psychic pressure intensified, and several crew members collapsed. But the humans pressed on, driven by something the ancient watchers had never encountered in their millions of years of culling dangerous species: spite. 30 seconds to Protocol Omega, Voss announced. "All hands, prepare for..." The universe exploded around them, not from their own weapons, but from something else entirely. A massive shape tore through the fabric of reality itself, emerging from a dimension that human mathematics couldn't describe. It was a ship, but calling it that was like calling a hurricane a gentle breeze. It was Kepler for to be. The entire planet, somehow converted into a vessel of war, bristled with weapons that made the gardeners' technology look primitive. And standing on the bridge of what had once been the Planetary Defense Center, visible through the transparent aluminum of the command dome, was Admiral Cares Durand. He was still laughing. "All gardener vessels," came his transmission, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. This is Admiral Duran of the Terran Colonial Navy. You came to my world uninvited. You threatened my people. You made the mistake of thinking that because you were old, you were wise. The planet ship's weapons began to charge. Energy signatures that made the investigation fleet's sensors scream warnings. Let me show you what humans do to gardeners who try to prune us. The first volley erased 6 gardener ships from existence. The second volley cracked the hull of the Harvester. The third volley sent the surviving gardener fleet into full retreat. Their impossible ships fleeing like startled birds. But as the immediate threat receded, Voss realized the true scope of what had happened. HFY hadn't just been converted into a weapon. It had been turned into something else entirely, a bridge between dimensions. A key to unlock secrets that the gardeners had spent millions of years keeping hidden. And now, humanity had that key. The aftermath of HFY to B's impossible return sent shockwaves through both fleets. The surviving gardener ships regrouped at the edge of the system, their organic hulls pulsing with what could only be described as confusion. In all their millions of years of culling young civilizations, they had never encountered anything like this. Admiral Duran's voice crackled across the comm system, his tone casual despite the cosmic impossibility of his situation. Captain Voss, good to see you're still breathing. Care to come aboard for a briefing? I think you'll find our new accommodations quite spacious. The docking bay of what had once been New Geneva Colony was now a cathedral of impossible architecture. HFY transformation had fused organic and technological elements in ways that hurt to contemplate. The 53 million colonists were still there, but they had become something more than human. Their consciousness expanded. Their bodies adapted to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What did you do? Voss asked as she stepped onto the docking platform, her environmental suit struggling to process the exotic atmosphere. Duran smiled, and she could see starlight behind his eyes. We learned to cheat. Turns out the gardeners aren't the only ancient species out there. There are others older, more powerful, and very interested in what happens when a young species breaks the rules. He led her through corridors that seemed to extend into infinity, past chambers where colonists worked at tasks that defy description. Some were manipulating raw space-time with their bare hands. Others were communing with entities that existed as pure mathematics. The gardeners are afraid, Duran continued. They've been the apex predators for so long, they forgot what it feels like to be prey. But there are things in the deep void that make them look like children. And those things have been waiting for someone bold enough or stupid enough to open the door. They reached the command center, where the planet's original defense grid had been transformed into something that resembled a massive neural network. Screens showed battle data from across human space, tracking the gardener assault in real time. The other colonies? Voss asked. Holding for now, but barely. The gardeners are methodical. They'll grind down our defenses, crack our worlds, and move on to the next species. Unless we stop them here. How? Duran's smile became predatory. By showing them what human tactical doctrine really looked like when we stopped playing nice. The transformation of HFY had done more than just convert a planet into a warship. It had given humanity access to the gardener's own network of vast, galaxy-spanning communication system that connected every one of their vessels. And now, Admiral Duran was using that network against them. We're not just fighting their ships, he explained as data streams flowed around them. We're fighting their entire civilization. Every gardener, every world they've claimed, every species they've uplifted to serve as their tools. But they made one critical mistake, which is, they assumed we'd fight fair. The first phase of Duran's counterattack was psychological warfare on a scale that made human military doctrine look quaint. Using the gardener network, he began broadcasting directly into their collective consciousness not just words, but raw human emotion, rage, defiance, the absolute refusal to accept extinction. The effect was immediate. Gardener ships across the galaxy began experiencing system failures as their crews struggled to process concepts that were antithetical to their ordered existence: chaos, unpredictability, the willingness to sacrifice everything for a principle. They've been culling species for millions of years, Duran said as the data stream showed gardener fleets falling into disarray. But they've never encountered anything like us. We don't just fight to survive, we fight to win. And we're willing to break every rule in the universe to do it. The second phase was more direct. HFY's new weapons systems began targeting not just gardener ships, but the dimensional rifts they used for travel, Each shot tore holes in reality itself, creating cascading failures that rippled across the galaxy. You're weaponizing space-time, Voss breathed. Watching the tactical display, we're using their own tools against them. The Gardeners control vast networks of space-folding technology, ancient gates that let them move between star systems instantly. But those gates work both ways. The third phase was the most brutal. Human ships began emerging from the dimensional rifts, not just the colonial fleet, but vessels from across human space. They came through the Gardener network itself, striking at the heart of their civilization with the fury of a species that had been marked for extinction. The Battle of the Void Garden, as historians would later call it, was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships, augmented with impossible technology, fought against Gardener fleets that had never known defeat. The engagement spread across multiple dimensions simultaneously, with casualties mounting on both sides. The Terran destroyer Vengeance rammed a Gardener bioship, its fusion reactor detonating in a blast that tore a hole in local space-time. The colonial frigate Last Stand held off 6 Gardener vessels while evacuating the survivors of a cracked research station, her crew fighting until their ship was reduced to molten slag. But the Gardeners were learning. Their initial confusion gave way to adaptation, and they began to counter human tactics with ruthless efficiency. The reformed Gardener fleet began targeting human civilian populations directly, using their reality-warping weapons to simply erase entire colonies from existence. They're getting desperate, Durand observed as reports flooded in from across human space. Good. Desperate enemies make mistakes. They're also getting vicious, Voss replied. Tau Ceti is gone. Completely. 23 million people just erased. I know, but that's the price of breaking the rules. The Gardeners have spent millions of years believing they were the ultimate arbiters of life and death in this galaxy. We're teaching them otherwise. The command center shuddered as HFY took a direct hit from the Harvester's main weapon. The attack that should have cracked the planet's crust barely scratched its transformed surface. Time for Phase 4, Durand said, his voice carrying across the transformed world. All hands, prepare for dimensional breach. We're taking this fight to their home. The Gardener homeworld existed in a pocket dimension that violated every law of physics humanity had ever discovered. It wasn't just a planet, it was a living construct the size of a small galaxy. Its surface covered in structures that pulsed with the accumulated knowledge of 1 billion extinct civilizations. HFY tore through the dimensional barrier like a cannonball through tissue paper, its impossible weapons already charging for the assault. Behind it came the combined human fleet, 300 ships from every colony, every world, every outpost that had survived the initial Gardener attack. They flew in formation around the planet's ship, their hulls scarred from the running battles that had brought them here. Jesus Christ, breathed Commander Reyna Vasquez from the bridge of the heavy cruiser Retribution. Look at the size of that thing. The Gardener homeworld stretched beyond the horizon, its surface covered in biomechanical cities that rose like coral reefs from an ocean of living metal, and defending it was a fleet that dwarfed anything the humans had faced before. Thousands of ships, each one a work of art that happened to be capable of cracking moons, all vessels. This is Admiral Durand, came the transmission from HFY. You know why we're here. For every human world they burned, for every colony they've erased, for every child they've murdered in the name of their twisted gardening. Today, we prune the Gardeners. The first exchange of fire lit up the pocket dimension like a newborn star. The Gardener fleet opened with their reality-warping weapons, beams of coherent impossibility that twisted space into Klein bottles and made straight lines curve back on themselves. The human fleet responded with everything they had: fusion torpedoes, antimatter warheads, and the new dimensional charges that Admiral Durand's people had developed. The colonial battleship Ironwell took a direct hit that turned its forward third into a mass of liquid metal, but Captain Morrison kept fighting, using his ship's dying fusion reactor to ram a Gardener biocruiser. Both vessels vanished in a flash of exotic radiation that painted the local space in colors that had no names. Commander Vasquez watched her tactical display with growing horror and pride. The human fleet was outnumbered 10 to 1, outgunned by weapons that seemed to operate on principles of science that wouldn't be discovered for another 1,000 years. But they kept fighting, kept pushing forward, driven by something the Gardeners couldn't understand. This is insane, her tactical officer said as the Retribution shuddered under a near miss. We're throwing ourselves at a fleet that's literally impossible to defeat. That's what makes us human, Vasquez replied, targeting another Gardner vessel. We don't know when to quit. The battle raged across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human ships would vanish into folds of twisted space-time, only to emerge behind Gardner lines with their weapons blazing. Gardner bioships would phase through solid matter, their crews attacking human vessels from within their own hulls. The destroyer Dauntless lasted 47 minutes against the Gardner dreadnought before her crew initiated self-destruct, taking the enemy vessel with them. In a blast that left both ships as expanding clouds of exotic particles, the frigate Perseverance held off 6 Gardner fighters while evacuating survivors from a crippled transport, her crew fighting until their ship was reduced to a skeleton of twisted metal. But the Gardners were learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics to counter human unpredictability. They began targeting command vessels specifically, using their psychic abilities to identify and eliminate human leadership. The battleship Sovereign lost her entire bridge crew to a psychic attack that left them catatonic, drifting helplessly, until a Gardner biocruiser finished her off. We're losing ships faster than we can replace them, Vasquez reported to Admiral Durand. At this rate, we'll be wiped out within the hour. Then we'd better finish this quickly, Durand replied. All vessels, prepare for Operation Cosmic Gardner. We're going to show these bastards what happens when you mess with Earth's children. The plan was typically human in its audacity. A direct assault on the Gardner homeworld surface, using HFY as a battering ram. The planet ship began to accelerate, its dimensional drives tearing holes in space-time as it plowed through the Gardner fleet. The enemy response was immediate and devastating. Every Gardner ship in the system converged on HFY, their weapons combining into a coherent beam that should have been capable of cracking continents. Instead, the transformed planet absorbed the energy and converted it into pure momentum, accelerating even faster toward the homeworld's surface. Impact in 60 seconds, Durand announced, his voice carrying across the entire human fleet. All ships, prepare for the transmission cut off as something impossible happened. The Gardner homeworld began to move, its galaxy-sized bulk shifting through dimensions like a snake shedding its skin. But it wasn't trying to escape, it was positioning itself to receive HFY's assault. It's a trap, Vasquez realized. They're going to absorb the planet ship, add its mass to their own. The impact, when it came, was unlike anything in the recorded history of the galaxy. HFY struck the Gardner homeworld with the force of a collapsing star. But instead of destruction, there was a fusion. The two massive constructs began to merge, their biomechanical systems intertwining in patterns that hurt to observe directly. What's happening? Vasquez demanded. The answer came from Admiral Durand, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. We're not just destroying their world. We're taking it, all of it, every piece of technology, every scrap of knowledge, every secret they've hoarded for millions of years. The fusion continued, and as it did, the remaining human fleet began to change. Their ships' hulls started to flow like liquid metal, adapting and upgrading themselves with Gardner technology. The crews themselves began to evolve, their consciousness expanding to encompass multiple dimensions. But the Gardners weren't giving up without a fight. The surviving elements of their fleet launched a desperate counterattack, throwing everything they had at the merging worlds. Bioships rammed human vessels in suicide runs. Psychic weapons tore through the minds of human crews, reality warping. Devices turned sections of space into mathematical impossibilities. The final phase of the battle was a brutal slugging match that lasted for what felt like hours, but was actually only minutes. Time itself had become unstable in the pocket dimension, flowing at different rates in different locations. Commander Vasquez watched her chronometer count backward as her ship engaged 3 Gardner vessels simultaneously. When it was over, the silence was deafening. The Gardner fleet was gone, their bioships reduced to drifting fragments of organic matter. The homeworld had been completely absorbed into HFY's mass, creating something that was no longer quite a planet and not quite a ship. And in the center of it all, Admiral Durand stood in his command center, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. He was still laughing. The transformation of HFY into something beyond human comprehension was only the beginning. As the planet ship absorbed the Gardner homeworld, Admiral Durand and his crew found themselves connected to a network of knowledge that spanned millions of years and countless civilizations. We're not just accessing their technology, Durand explained to the assembled fleet commanders via quantum link. We're inheriting their entire purpose. Every species they've ever culled, every world they've gardened, every civilization they've deemed dangerous to exist. We're the inheritors of their empire. Captain Voss, now aboard the transformed HFY, walked through corridors that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously. The colonists, the 53 million humans who had undergone the transformation, were no longer recognizably human. They existed as hybrid beings, part biological, part technological, part something else entirely. What have you become? She asked one of them, a former agricultural engineer named Dr. Helena Vasquez, who now pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. That hurt to look at directly. We are what humanity needed to become, Vasquez replied, her voice carrying harmonics from multiple dimensions. The gardeners weren't evil, Captain. They were doing what they believed was necessary. This galaxy is ancient, and it's full of things that make the gardeners look like children. They've been holding back the real threats for millions of years. The revelation hit Voss like a physical blow. You're saying they were protecting us, in their way, but their method was flawed. They thought the only way to prevent dangerous species from attracting attention was to eliminate them. We're going to try a different approach. The different approach became clear as reports flooded in from across human space. The remaining gardener fleets, those that had survived the destruction of their homeworld, were not retreating. They were surrendering. Their bioships powering down their weapons and transmitting codes that Admiral Durand's expanded consciousness recognized as formal submissions. They're offering to serve under human leadership, Durand announced to the fleet. Every gardener, every uplifted species they've created, every world they've claimed, they're transferring their entire civilization to human control. The magnitude of it was staggering. Humanity had gone from being a young species marked for extinction to inheriting the governance of a galaxy-spanning empire. But with that inheritance came responsibilities. That made traditional military command look simple. There are things moving in the void between galaxies, Durand continued, his expanded consciousness reaching out across impossible distances. The gardeners called them the Devourers. They're what happens when a civilization grows too large, too powerful, too hungry. They consume entire galactic clusters, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The first Devourer contact came 3 days later. It wasn't a ship or a fleet, it was a presence that announced itself by simply existing. The very fabric of space-time began to unravel at the edge of the galaxy, and through the growing tear came something that made the gardener homeworld look like a child's toy. It's the size of a solar system, reported Commander Vasquez from the bridge of the Retribution. Her ship now upgraded with gardener biotechnology, and it's not just moving through space, it's eating it, literally consuming reality as it goes. The Devourer's arrival had an immediate effect on the former gardener fleet. Their bioships began to panic, their crews experiencing the same terror that had driven them to cull young civilizations for millions of years. But instead of fleeing, they looked to their new human commanders for leadership. All vessels. This is Admiral Durand, came the transmission from HFY. You wanted to know why the gardeners were so afraid of dangerous species, why they spent millions of years trying to keep the galaxy quiet. Now you know. But here's the thing about humans, we don't run from monsters, we kill them. The strategy that emerged was pure human doctrine scaled up to cosmic proportions. Instead of trying to hide from the Devourer or negotiate with it, humanity decided to go on the offensive. Using the combined knowledge of the gardener's civilization and the transformed power of HFY, they began to weaponize the galaxy itself. Stars were converted into fusion bombs, planets were turned into kinetic projectiles, entire solar systems were reconfigured as weapons platforms. The scope of the operation was beyond anything the gardeners had ever attempted. But then again, the gardeners had never been human. This is insane. Velenish observed from her position aboard the Indomitable. The Korthani had volunteered to serve as liaisons between humanity and the other galactic species, many of whom were struggling to comprehend the scale of what was happening. Insane is what we do best, Captain Voss replied, watching as the Milky Way itself began to reshape. Under human direction, the gardeners spent millions of years trying to keep the galaxy safe by making it small. We're going to keep it safe by making it dangerous. The transformation accelerated as more former gardener assets came online. Ancient shipyards that had been dormant for millennia roared back to life, producing vessels that combined human ingenuity with technologies that predated the formation of Earth's solar system. The hybrid human gardener crews worked with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, their expanded consciousness allowing them to coordinate across vast distances. But the Devourer was not idle. As it approached the galactic rim, it began to spawn smaller versions of itself, planet-sized entities that moved ahead of the main body. Like scouts, each one consumed everything in its path, growing larger and more powerful with every star system it devoured. First contact with Devourer scouts in 72 hours, reported Admiral Duran. All defensive positions are to be ready. This is not a drill. People, this is the fight for everything. The first engagement took place in the Perseus Arm, where a Devourer scout encountered the human defensive line. The battle was over in minutes, but those minutes redefined what warfare meant on a galactic scale. The scout consumed 3-star systems before the human forces could coordinate their response, but when they did, the result was spectacular. The converted battleship Prometheus, now fused with Gardener biotechnology, fired a weapon that tore the scout apart at the quantum level. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star that burned for exactly 17 minutes before fading to nothing. One down, Durand announced. Approximately 3,000 to go. The pattern repeated across the galaxy as Devourer scouts made contact with human defensive lines. Each engagement taught the humans something new about their enemy, and each victory came at a terrible price. Entire fleets were consumed, their crews becoming part of the Devourer's mass, but humanity adapted, learned, and grew stronger. The turning point came when Dr. Helena Vasquez, now serving as Kepler 442b's chief science officer, made a discovery that changed everything. The Devourers aren't just consuming matter and energy, she announced during a strategy session. They're consuming information itself. Every civilization they devour, every bit of knowledge they absorb, makes them smarter, but that also makes them vulnerable. How? Voss asked. They're trying to understand us. Every human fleet they consume gives them more data about how we think, how we fight, how we solve problems. But human thinking is chaotic, unpredictable. The more they learn about us, the more confused they become. It was a uniquely human solution to an impossible problem. Instead of trying to hide their nature from the Devourers, they would weaponize it. Every human ship would be equipped with AI systems designed to generate pure chaos, random decisions, illogical tactics, strategies that violated every principle of military doctrine. We're going to give them indigestion, Duran said with satisfaction. Every time they try to consume a human vessel, they'll get a massive dose of pure, concentrated human stubbornness. Let's see how their perfect cosmic order handles that. The final preparations took 3 weeks. The entire galaxy became a fortress, with every world, every station, every ship converted into part of a massive defensive network. The transformed humans served as living nodes in the system, their expanded consciousness allowing them to coordinate on a scale that the gardeners had never imagined. And at the center of it all, Admiral Cares Duran stood in his command center, surrounded by the combined knowledge of 1 million dead civilizations. Watching as the main Devourer body approached the galactic rim, he was still laughing, but now his laughter carried harmonics that echoed across dimensions, a sound that spoke of humanity's absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds.